Coming up, a Sad Styles production.
Get into it.
And welcome to the Retrograde, the video game podcast, where this week we take a look back at one of the greatest years in video game history, 1999.
Oh my goodness, so good. My name is Andrew Bassman. With me, as always, is the bad boy of podcasting, Mr. Bebop himself.
Mikey, the artist formerly known as Prince Aaronworth.
And that's because of the song 1999?
Yeah, he has a song in which he says 1999, and I figured that would be a good name. And it's another one of those situations we could party like it's 99. It's another one of those situations where I started to say my name and realized as soon as I said Mikey, I could have said the artist formerly known as Mikey Aaronworth. And I just fucking fucked it up, Andrew. We are so close to 300 episodes on this, and I can't seem to get a nickname right, and it's starting to frustrate me. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, I'm glad you're consistent. Like, that's an important part. You're consistently uneven with this, and that's good. Yeah. You know, there is one part of this that I will say. A lot of people say I'm my own worst critic, and they'll say that very earnestly, like I'm a worst critic, as a way of avoiding criticism. Like, don't worry, whatever you say, I've said it to myself first. And for the most part, I find that to be not true.
However, you are the exception. You are the exception that whatever you say, it's going to be the worst version of it. Yeah, for the most part, except sometimes when I publicly say bad things about myself, these people who I don't even know just pipe up and they're like, actually, I've got more shit to say.
I'm going to pile on a little bit. Oh, that was good. Yeah, that's a good start. Okay, here, but I got one too.
It's a good pace.
Yeah, that's good. All right, good. You know, you look like that bodybuilder with the mustache, but nothing like it. And you're like, did this start as a compliment?
The worst part, and this goes back a couple episodes when I said I sometimes get compared to Mike Bumstead just because he has a mustache and curly hair. That's pretty much it. But the problem is I now make a joke where I say, yeah, except he's nowhere near as strong as me, and people laugh so hard at that. And it's
way too hard.
A little bit too hard. Yeah, that's what kind of frustrates me a little bit. Andrew's wrestling a dog over there on his end. Hey,
I am so sorry. The dog found the puzzle that is exceptionally noisy and would be not entertaining at all on this podcast. Well, maybe more entertaining. Maybe just people watching him play the puzzle and they're like, best episode we've ever had.
Just had a dog reviews were great where your dog was playing on a puzzle as we talked. I think our viewership would go up like at least 50%.
Honestly, the way we could do it is the dog could decide episodes, because on the puzzle, it'll be like opening it like, oh, we're doing,
Jelly Boy's back.
Jelly Boy again? How does Jelly Boy keep getting in there?
Andrew, before we get too far off topic, we're going to be taking a look today at back at the year 1999. We've done this before on the podcast. It started on our now sunsetted Patreon, where we would take a look back at one of the greatest years in video game history. And you and I would take turns drafting games, a team of 6 games that we would kind of put into different categories to see, using only games that were released in that year, which team comes out on top. It's a project and a game and a practice that you and I have done a lot before. And I absolutely adore it. I was really excited to get started with this one. 1999 was one of those years that kind of snuck up on me. I kind of worried that we were going back to the well maybe one too many times, because I'm like, how many great years are there? We've done 2007, we've done 1996, we've done 98, 2001. It's got me thinking, like, was the stretch from 96 to 99 or maybe even 2001, like one of the best stretches in gaming history?
Well, honestly, if 1999 included, I also did the same thing. I was like, well, how good could this be? Because we've done 98, we've done all these other years that you're like, so good. And then you keep looking and you go, oh God, okay, all right. And I'm going through the calendar and I'm already getting to September and my list is so deep. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to run out of games, that's for sure. And especially 100%. Because, you know, more than critical acclaim and other things, 1999 was a very important video game year for me. I was 13 years old, and this is like prime video game time. Like, I am playing the most amount of video games. I'm the most involved into the world of video games and releases that I have been up until that point in my life. And so there is all these games that not just the biggest games that I love, but all these other like secret, subtle games that I was like, oh, this is right down my alley.
Secret, subtle games. Tell me more.
Shh, it's a secret.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, there's a bunch of games that often get referenced on this podcast, and it's amazing how many of them did come out in 1999, which, like, I guess it's going to happen naturally because we're talking about retro games a lot of the times on this podcast, or oftentimes on this podcast. So, like, they're going to be bundled up across, like, 1 or 2 years. But it was amazing, this one, so much so, like, this year was so surprising to me that we actually discussed an evolution to the categories. It started out where we would do one. We would draft all the 6 games, and we had to draft them into a specific category. So the categories prior to today were competitive game, we had an action game, we had an adventure game. Then we went to more theoretical, like the most influential game from that year, the most poorly aged game from that year, the game of the year, and then we would have a tiebreaker for underappreciated. So this time, because I don't know if it was just the era of the games that were coming out or what, but it was hard to put a lot of the games into any of these categories.
Yes.
So it almost seemed like there was a miscellaneous category that would just be like ignoring a ton of other games if we only picked one for it. So instead of having competitive, action, and adventure, we're going to do just 3 games that go into our standard pile, and then we're going to continue on with the categories of most influential, poorly aged, game of the year, and underappreciated.
I will also say too, is like in the past we've done this, it was always like, well, you didn't name this game, and it's like, well, it didn't fall into one of the categories, and it's like, well, that's kind of silly. Actually, we should probably just be able to name games.
Yeah, I think so. And this kind of it allows us to keep a little bit of structure without going completely off the rails. Because I do like the strategy of being like, oh, he's already picked most influential, so that means I've got it. Like these ones, I can kind of put that one aside. Do you have, like, I was thinking about this as I was putting my list together. Do you have a category that's kind of like your favorite?
Yes, I do. I would say either influential or underappreciated are my favorite categories right now. I would say, can I say my weakest one right now?
Your weakest game or your weakest category? Okay, say your weakest category.
Poorly aged. I'm having trouble coming up with poorly aged games. There's a lot of good games.
There was one that I thought was an absolute shoo-in. And I was so excited to say it, but we agreed that we were only going to pick the games that came out North American releases. So I guess I can just say it now. But
say it now.
In 1999 in Japan, I think December 29th, 1999 in Japan.
I know which one, because it's mine too.
Shenmue.
Yeah, Shenmue, and then I also have from that week Seaman.
Oh, Seaman. Yeah,
I was gonna be like, that's influential as hell. We want to talk to all our video games now.
No, not influential. I was saying poorly aged. Like Shenmue. Well. Shenmue is a poorly aged one. I wanted that one so bad because it was like a game. I remember it coming out and people being like, oh my God, you're just like walking around asking people if they've seen Chinese sailors or whatever the fuck you have to do in chapter 1 of that game.
Seems like it left a huge impression on you.
Left a very good impression on me. But there are now, like, it was a game that went from being so ahead of its time to being one of the more memed games I've ever seen. Like just a picture of Shenmue that says, let's get sweaty or something like that. Just these weird, poorly voice acted lines that
I know we've got a few artists at home. If you want to draw Mikey saying "Let's get sweaty," I think we're all for it.
I think we're all for it. So I'm excited to get into it. Actually, speaking of artists, Andrew, before we get into our draft this year, I hopped on over to the Retrograde Gmail account, retrogradepodcast@gmail.com. Joe Griffin, good friend of the show, had sent us his 10 favorite things from 2023. So this is looking back for a few weeks ago, and we did our top 10 things of 2023. So this includes video games, movies, TV shows, music, books, all that sort of thing. You should go back and listen to that episode because it was a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
The Joe's list: Blackula, Return of the King, which is a graphic novel by Rodney Barnes and Jason Sean Alexander. Number 9, Evil Dead Rise. That's one that you liked that one, eh?
I did.
I didn't. That one did not work for me. Spider-Man 2, God of War Valhalla, which was the free DLC to God of War. Have you tried that one out yet?
I'm not enough to have a real opinion on it, but I've tried a little bit, and I actually talked to Joe about it too. So, like,
oh, nice. It looks
Joe,
great.
one of our more active listeners too. So, average grade Mikey, average grade Andy. Just saying.
Hell yeah. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off at number 6, which is a show I haven't seen yet, but I really want to. Fall of the House of Usher at 5, Resident Evil 4, the remake, RoboCop, Rogue City. You know what? It's amazing. I keep hearing people go back and playing that game and they really like it. Is that something that's in the cards for you at all, do you think?
Oh, I think 100%. I've seen clips of this and I'm like, why am I not playing this? It seems ultra violent and like God mode stuff where you just feels so powerful. And really, when I'm a big weakling that's a big coward in real life, I think that's a really like big fantasy of mine.
It is very appealing. I just want to go beat up youths on the street.
Yeah, I'm
under
a
the
real
banner of
baby
the law.
yeah.
And then after that, we've got The Last of Us, HBO, totally understandable. And then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem. You saw that one, right?
I did. I liked it quite a bit. It's very cute, using real teenage actors and stuff like that. And it comes across in a different way that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles ever has before, with like the excitement of the age that they're supposed to be and stuff like that. Really, really good.
It looked like it looked good. I'm surprised I haven't seen it. I thought that was going to be like a day one or a weekend release for me. And then Joe caps off his email by saying some of his highlights from the year were making artwork for people who he thinks are awesome and do awesome things he's a fan of, like us, for example. Thanks for saying that. He says he's thankful. He says, I'm thankful you guys do this incredibly funny and awesome podcast to make my Tuesdays worthwhile. Happy New Year. And as the great Mitch McConnell would say, oh, I shit myself again. I actually had to scroll down in his email.
Oh, that's so funny.
Great. Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
That's awesome. So, Andrew, before we get started with the draft, any gaming updates that you got going on?
Yeah, let's think. Any gaming updates? You know, what I'm trying to do is not accelerate full speed into Fortnite talk, but I can't help it. This season is fucking phenomenal. The new season, we really haven't talked since the new one came out, because last time we had talked, they went back to the season 1, the original map, and I was fine with it. It's not my Fortnite, so I was not my Fortnite, not my president. So it's not my Fortnite. So I didn't have. There was a real adjustment period, and I just didn't find the same appeal. And then they like accelerated into the next level of going like, okay, that was the original. Now it's way past the last chapter you remember, and it's just a lot of fun. There's a lot of action going on, and I don't know what it is. This could be completely anecdotal based on the people in my life, but it feels like more people than ever I know are playing Fortnite. So it's kind of really exciting.
Crazy. Yeah.
Which is crazy considering it's been around for so many years. But it's just, it finds ways to evolve, and I feel silly talking about it going after a couple of years going like, I'm still playing that game, but it's giving me a lot of reason to do that. So, silly or not, I'm still playing it.
You know what it feels like? It feels kind of like, remember when Bitcoin first came? Like, do you remember when you first heard about Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Years ago. I'm talking like over a decade ago, like forever ago. It feels like I remember my cousin telling me about it and just being like, I don't understand what the fuck you're talking about. And like,
you
it was kind
of, you're like,
yeah. I'm like, I just mine digitally. Okay. Whatever you say, dude. Go kick rocks. And then a couple of years later, you hear a little bit more about it. And this is like the early days of Fortnite. Like we're playing Overwatch and having Call of Duty and having a good time with it. And there's this little game over there that Epic's making. You're like, whatever. And then it gets to a point where it's so big that you're like, I can't imagine this getting any bigger. And then it fucking it kind of like tapers off and then explodes again. Like it seems like Fortnite just keeps on making decisions that are keeping it as like the game, the mainstream, the casual game, whatever you want to call it. It's become an ecosystem as opposed to just like something you flip on for 30 minutes, and it's exciting to see where it's going. Yeah,
it's insane that it's growing, not plateauing or whatever. It's growing. There's a real.
Are you a grower or a plateauer?
Oh, I'm a plateauer. Same big as same small. Plateau the whole time.
It doesn't grow. Growth. It just gets dense. Just gets dense. In whatever shape it was in, it just hardens like fucking like a Caterpie or something like that. So if
you took like a water balloon and then froze it, it's kind of like that.
I've always imagined it.
That's okay. Good. Well, there you go. You got a confirmation. I think the other thing is, so since we're doing like a little bit of time traveling, talking about 1999, I've always thought about the idea that if it's like if I can only go back and tell myself what I know now, you would not believe the person that came to you and went, you know what? You won't believe this. Like this, these things, this digital coins you got to mine. You're like, yeah. Okay, sure. All right. Yeah, sounds 100%. Good. Fortnite, biggest game in the world. You're like, no, Call of Duty is thanks. Appreciate it, man. Go take, kick rocks, like Mikey said. So I always think about that. Like, the Back to the Future 2 with sports predictions. If someone had told you like the biggest long shot in the world is going to win, you should put your life savings on it. You would be like, no, that team is bad. Why would I do that? That's stupid. Thanks.
I don't care what you say. I will not bet on Buster Douglas. I don't care if Mike Tyson has gonorrhea right now.
Yes. What's the famous one from soccer? Leicester City?
Yeah, it was Leicester. It was they like one of the most miraculous wins in Premier League history. Because just to contextualize in soccer or a British football or whatever they want to fucking call it over there. They there are no playoffs in the main, like in the Premier League. So the only way you can win is by having the best record across the entire season. And this team that came out of nowhere with very little financial backing won the whole league and had to do so consistently. It's not the NCAA or even the Super Bowl where you can just get lucky with a string of like a few wins and then you're crowned the champion. Hot. It's amazing.
No, I don't. There's a Ted Lasso quote I think about all the time, and one of them is that they're like, "There's no relegation in American sports." He's like, "No." They're like, "Well, what do you do?" And you're like, "Well, about half the teams are out pretty much immediately. They're, they give a half effort to a half empty stadium, and we really love it. We really love it." And I think about that all the time.
Them with the number one pick the next year. Yeah.
Yes, but at the same time, most of those fans will be like, "I hate socialism," and you're like, "Oh, what are you gonna do?" So yes, I just always think about that. I would never believe an older version of myself going like, "You know what you need to do?" I'm like, "Shut up, old man."
Yeah. And this was 1999. I was a child. I had finally bought my Dreamcast, and only to have the world tell me that Y2K is about to happen and wipe this thing clean. Like, no, thank you. This thing's too advanced for stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly. I have a talking Leonard Nimoy fish. Are you out of your mind that it's going to get shut down?
This is the future. I wonder what would happen if you asked Seaman what Y2K, what would happen on Y2K?
It is all a hoax, Mikey.
Seaman was amazing. Yeah.
Both feels futuristic in 1999 and today. I'd be like, whoa, Leonard Nimoy, Jesus, he's from the future. Spock has a real chokehold on us, excuse me.
A stronghold?
Well, you know what? Yeah, clearly my brain was competing with two different words, and I thought for a bit, I'm like, wait, doesn't Spock do a chokehold? And I'm like, no, he gives that little pinch.
Oh,
he knocks people out.
Yeah.
So.
So Andrew, before we do the draft, you had a little time to talk Fortnite. I wanted to give a little update on a game that I was playing, a game called Jusant. It's a game that was developed by a French company. The name is escaping me right now. I should know it. I should look it up. In fact, as I'm talking, it was legit just like a 2 or 3 hour experience. It's by Don't Nod. Sorry, Don't Nod is the name of the developer.
I think it's by Le Video Game Magnifique.
Oh, Le Video Game Magnifique. Wait, are you joking? Wait, what? Just because it's
why
French?
Why would I joke about a French video game manufacturer? That sounds insane. You sound insane that I would make a joke about the French.
Andrew,
get out of here.
Some of our audience is Canadian. The American audience isn't going to understand what Le Video Game Magnifique means. They don't have any reference point. I think they can
parse it together.
I don't think they can.
Actually, that's a good point. Obviously, this made-up video game manufacturer is The Video Game Magnificent.
No, it's a game that's basically just about climbing. You start, you are a silent protagonist. You have a little animal in this backpack of yours, this cute little adorable chubby little animal, and you start climbing this abandoned mountain. And within the mountain, there are different vestibules where there was a sort of history, and you're doing the typical thing of finding notes that explain the context of where you were. And as you climb higher and higher, you start to realize that at a time in history, this whole area was full of water and in fact would have been underwater. So you're climbing this mountain and realizing that you would have been climbing like up into an ocean sort of. It's this really interesting dynamic. And as the mystery unfolds, it's interesting. There's a little bit of a human individual story element to it because of the notes that you pick up. The story itself is complicated and bizarre and I will say artistic in spite of, I think, something that Roger Ebert would take exception to. But it was lonely and the mechanics of climbing were this kind of like built from the ground up mechanic that I've never experienced in a video game before.
Okay.
And the whole thing didn't overstay its welcome. Like 3 hours, there weren't a ton of collectibles to go find behind every corner. And I had a blast with it. The ending almost made me cry. It was a ton of fun.
Wow.
It's available on Game Pass. It's a relatively inexpensive game. And I really recommend people go check it out. If for no other reason, like story and everything aside, more video games should incorporate this mechanic of climbing, because you and I talk about, like Uncharted, and one of our least favorite things about that franchise is just in Assassin's Creed and all that is like point into a direction and press A. That's what climbing is. In this, you have to find handholds and move one limb, and the trigger will grab onto it, and then you let go the other trigger, and that's your right hand, and you move your right joystick over to and it's this fun experience of figuring out how to climb, not just based on whatever's shining, but actually the terrain of the mountain, which was very intuitive.
So like it's a rewarding mechanic, not an infuriating mechanic. Like it's not like you can learn and get better. That's the best part.
Easy. Yeah. And it's, in fact, it's very, there's no death in the game, which I'm always okay with. It's just kind of like, it rewards you for doing it well because you go faster and it's more fluid, but it doesn't punish you by dying, by making you go back, to replay 15, 20 minutes of progress. The one thing I'll say that does bother me about it a little bit, and this is kind of a note that I think a lot of indie games can take. I don't know. I'll get your take on it.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on like written notes in games in order to explain story to you? Do you know what I mean? Like the audio logs from BioShock, but just written down.
I think for the most part, I like them. I think they can be overdone. I think they can be lazy if not given a choice to try and explain the story in the first part. But if there are coloring in the edges of the story and you use them in that way, but they're completely optional, then I am all for it. Like you're talking about the audio logs, because you could ignore them. You could just play the game and never find out about these things. Yeah. But if you like the game and you want to learn more about it, it's giving the option to do that, which I think is beneficial to the player, because then they feel more invested in the world. But if somebody is more on a time crunch or not really, into the story, they have an option to keep going through. So I'm all for it if given that option. I assume in this game it wasn't. It
was always optional. You don't have to pick up anything. You don't have to go through all these different exploration elements as well. But I don't know. I feel like I'm getting a little bit bored of it. And the problem is I don't have a solution for it apart from saying that BioShock did it, and you pick up a log and it plays. It just plays out there. Now, I don't want to sit and just read a note it feels like the developers are almost rushing through to just add context to things in not a very creative way. But I know that not all development studios have the ability to hire voice actors, so that's an issue there. Yeah. It's just, I'm putting it on notice, I think. If you have a video game company, I'm putting you on notice that maybe we can find some more creative written notice. I'm writing, and this is a verbal warning and a written warning, and it's going in their file.
The irony. Yeah.
Why is it ironic?
Because then they'd have to read the note about how people shouldn't leave written notes in video games.
Oh, damn, dude, that's good. That's good. Yeah. What if I did this? What if I wrote down the note and I was like, read that out loud, and they read it out loud, and I was like, now it's a verbal warning too, bitch.
Yeah, I think you're setting somebody up. I think there are laws against this.
Oh, is this like entrapment?
Yeah, this sounds like an entrapment. More like a honeypot situation if you're wearing like a crop top and a short skirt.
Which I do in the office all the time.
Which you do.
And every time I come in with my crop top on, I go to HR and they write down a note and they pass it over to me, and I say, I'm not looking at that. I'm not fucking reading that.
You think I can read? Get out of here.
Oh man, so Jusant, that's game JUSANT by Le Video Game Magnifique, the great
Le Video Game Magnifique. Ooh la la. This gets 3 ooh la las from the Paris Gazette.
We call this one a ooh la 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 out of 5.
It's how many laws you get?
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone starts with ooh, and then ooh 3 out of 4 laws.
Ooh is a given. It's like you can't have 0 stars. Ooh is there.
Yes.
Yeah. So a really bad game is just a ooh.
Ooh.
Yeah, there you go. So Andrew, why don't we get into this draft then? I can't remember who went first last time, but I think the last time we did a back and forth, I went first. So why don't you start us off, Andrew? This is the first pick. And before we get started on this, Andrew, we always ask this question: is there a clear number 1 for you this year?
No.
Really?
No.
Okay.
I'd be happy going second. So keep that in mind. I have a feeling you will probably get whatever your choice is. You will probably get it. I'm not, and it's not being weirdly, I don't know, distant to the whole thing. I think you have a clear one in mind. It's not so clear to me, so I probably won't take it.
To me, there's a clear number 1, although there's an argument to be made for what I have to assume will be the second pick. So why don't you go first here and let me see what your first overall pick is.
Yeah. Okay. So
and
first
also
overall
remind
pick,
us what category you're drafting it to.
Yes, absolutely. My first overall pick Once again, we're taking 3 general games. We're taking an influential game. We're taking a poorly aged game and a game of the year. And later, a 7th pick will be underappreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my first pick is going to be under influential.
Oh, okay.
I am going to be taking Super Smash Bros.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
I feel that cooperative games, 4 people, 4 different characters from 4 different universes can be playing on the same game, has set a pace in 1999 to show what future video games will be for the next 25. I think that kind of level of elimination, but having fun with it, not taking things too seriously. There are so many elements of this that would be influenced in many different styles of games, and not even in this genre. I just think you look at Super Smash Bros. And you can see the future of gaming for the next 25 years. So Super Smash Bros. Under influential was the first pick for me.
Yeah, that one's a must. Like, that one obviously has to get picked. The thing that I'll say too that I don't think you touched on for how influential it is one of the first experiences of merging IP. And I know they're all within Nintendo, but like, you have Mario fighting Pikachu in this.
Yes,
that was fucking mind-boggling. And I know we had our Mario Karts in the past, but that was all under like strict Nintendo. And this, Link wasn't in Mario Kart. There was a clear difference in terms of which franchises were allowed to mingle. The second you got Pokemon and F-Zero, it was like all bets were off. And that, as you know, we just talked about Fortnite and how important it is to mingle IP. That's a great one.
Thank you very much. I did say from different universes. Maybe you weren't listening. So
the problem is as soon as you pick, I'm just thinking about my next pick. And then I'm like, I got to say something about this to pretend like I was listening.
Once you realized I didn't take your pick, it was relief. And then thinking about, what am I going to say when I make my pick?
Yeah, now I've got a lot of different ways I can go here.
That clearly wasn't it, eh?
That was not it. No, there were two that I thought that it could be, and that was neither of them. Although that is an absolute stunner of a pick. Like this is a really good year. So when we look back at the order in which these were picked, I think there's an argument to be made for any of them. I'm going to go all the way for game of the year with this one. And there's a reason why, because I think that you have to put an emphasis on game of the year being something. It works best when it is a massive game, when it foreseeably could have been game of the year and isn't just like a slide. And so I want to make a bang with that. I also think it's important that the game is something of the time that captured people's hearts and minds. And I think that the game, when I think about 1999 and video games, regardless of the platform, regardless of what types of games you liked before, this was a new entry point and a new entryway. It changed video games. It changed extreme sports. It's Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
Yeah, totally fair. Yeah, absolutely. Hard to argue. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Tony Hawk. I just couldn't pull the trigger on it with number 1 because I'm sorry, I'm doing the Mikey thing. I don't like doing this. I'm immediately taking a shot at your pick. I think it's a great pick. You have to.
I want to hear why, because I thought that if you had number 1, that was going to be yours 100%. I'm very curious to hear why not.
Well, that's not the franchise. That's not the element of the franchise or the installment of the franchise that I think about most. And so when I was thinking about Tony Hawk as a whole, I wasn't thinking about number 1. And so I was thinking, well, I'll put that down a little bit, even though for sure I'd want that game. I love that game. That's so good. But because I feel like it grew more later, that's where I kind of knocked it down a few spots.
I hear that for sure. I think if I'm putting myself in 1999 though, and I don't have the foresight of how many of these games are coming down the pipe over the next 4 years or so. The half pipe. The half pipe, exactly. Yeah, coming rolling down the half pipe. Or for me, I'm more Chad Muska, so it's like what's coming down the street.
You're more of a Mullen guy. Yeah.
Rod Mullen. Yeah. But that one, I feel like you can slot that anywhere. You want to invite a friend over to play it, great. You want to play single player, great. You already beat single player, doesn't matter. Boot it up again. You lost your memory card, play it again from scratch. It's always just as fun as it was the first time.
I can't say I blame you. It's a fantastic game. So, good on you.
Yep.
For getting it. Okay, so that's my pick next. We're not doing a snake draft, right? Okay. Snake. Okay. So I think I am going to go my game of the year.
Okay.
Man, these get so tough so fast.
It really does.
I'm going to go my game of the year next. This is just a me pick. I was surprised to see. So when I'm doing... It's a me. I'm wearing red after all. I was going through the list of like games that came out in 1999 and all this kind of stuff. I'm so sorry. I think my dog is trying to tell me he's out of food.
He's out of food.
Yeah, he's out of food. That's why he's banging
do you
a
want
bowl.
do you want to go feed him, and I'll talk to the audience about why I'm about to win this draft?
Can you, like, we have priorities here, buddy. Like,
Are you talking to me or the dog?
I'm talking to the dog right now. It just,
because we have priorities.
Well, we do also have priorities. Well, you know what? The three of us have priorities, and they're getting. Oh my god. Okay, I'm gonna take this bowl away. I'll be right back.
Okay, Andrew's gonna leave, and I'm gonna talk my way through it. So I don't. Oh, actually, Andrew has his headphones in, so I can't really say much. But I will say, well, he can't defend himself. Andrew, if you don't say that's wrong within a second and a half, then I'm the coolest person in the world. One,
that's wrong.
Two, fucking bullshit. He heard me. God damn it.
That's right.
He got me.
Okay. So I was going through lots of lists and trying to find exactly where everything stood at the time. Metacritic's Game of the Year. All these awards that were given out. And it's funny how time changes things, because this game was kind of ranked a little bit lower than I thought, yet I really do think I have to take it for Game of the Year. I have to be true to myself.
Okay.
And that is, of course, I'm going to be taking Donkey Kong 64.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So that's okay. Explain a little bit about what that game meant to you then, and why that ranks so high on your Game of the Year list.
Okay, so when I think of playing Donkey Kong 64, I think about the future. I think about that's what video games are going to look like. Look how real it looks. It looks so good. The music was killer. You played with different characters. It was expanding of a world that I was interested in, but didn't get a chance to be in very often. And I just loved it. It was hard, and I thought about it all the time, but yet I could beat it. And, it was rewarding perfectly for a 13-year-old. I absolutely loved this game, and so I have to play it for Game of the Year.
Yeah, what's interesting? I spent a long time looking at Donkey Kong 64, and for some reason, it just didn't. It's never been the game I think of when I think of those rare platformer games.
Oh, really?
I get the appeal. Like, you make a good point when you talk about, like, this is the future of video games. This is what video games can be. Because the last time we saw Donkey Kong in, like, his own game was 2D, and he was throwing fucking barrels, and, like, it wasn't, he's running from side to side. Granted, on the Super Nintendo, Donkey Kong Country looked like one of the greatest games that you could play. Like, looked really, really good.
Absolutely.
But to be able to play with that same character in 3D space felt like such a jump up from what it once was. So I get that. But for some reason, as far as like I would take Banjo-Kazooie over Donkey Kong any day of the week. And I know Banjo-Kazooie didn't come out this year, but when I'm comparing similar styles of games, that's why I always have just a bit of a sticking point for some reason with Donkey Kong. But, there's no argument. It is a great game.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm going to take it for Game of the Year, just being true to myself. I know this might be slightly controversial, and we'll get to some games that I think people will probably rather have that there, but we'll see. So what's going to be your next pick? I'm so curious.
So I'm going to go with, this is where I struggle a little bit, because I have personal picks and then picks that I know are the right picks to make. I'm going to go with one here that I think kind of falls in the middle a little bit. My favorite of the franchise, which I think is often looked very poorly upon, not the game itself, but for this to be like the crown jewel of the franchise with such a fantastic history to it. Yeah, some people look past that, but Final Fantasy VIII was a game, and I'm going to take it to just one of my standard games here that just really hit me as a kid for some reason. I was like pre-high school, so to watch these like older but not adult people kind of be part of this almost like boarding school and go out and save the world, the gun blades, the soundtrack, the wide open area. Like, there was so much I remember about that game that hit me so fondly and just hit me like sentimentally. And looking back on it, Final Fantasy VIII is one of the more well remembered in the franchise. But I think for the most part, if people are going to choose one from that era, they go Final Fantasy VII. But Final Fantasy VIII is my pick for game number one, we'll call it.
So that's game number one. That's just general game you're going to put under there.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to now decipher between underappreciate using categories and using general games. And I think I'm going to keep going back to the categories, because general games are general games. I can take general games whenever I want. I salute you, general games. So what am I going to do here? I'm going to go to underappreciated, which was a category.
So keeping in mind, this is the tiebreaker.
Oh yeah, shit! I don't want to do that. That's the tiebreaker.
Yeah, so that's the one that kind of matters the least. It may not even come into play.
Okay. Okay. Let me take... Okay, so I'm going to take general games now. I'm going to take Gran Turismo 2.
Okay, great pick.
Gran Turismo 2 is kind of the last of the games, if I'm getting my personal opinion out of the way, that I played that was a realistic racing game. I had played lots of racing games like, NASCAR or, IndyCar kind of open wheel kind of stuff. But this one was one of the ones that also, once again, like Donkey Kong, but in a different way. I was like, holy shit, this is what video games look like? They look real. I can't even tell the difference. Now it's hilarious if you go back and look at it. But it was just so good and so beautiful, and you could use real cars, and oh my God, it just felt like absolutely stepping into the future. It was such an important game, and I absolutely loved it. Gran Turismo 2, that'll be my first game off the board.
I think I like it too because that it does round out your picks nicely. Like, it's good to have a racing game in there. Like, we used to have the competition field, as we mentioned before we started to do the podcast, and racing games always fit very well there. I'm gonna go something a little bit different for my pick though. I'm gonna go to no, you are fuck. No, I'm gonna go to influential. I am gonna go to influential here. Man, no, there's so you know what? Before we start recording these, I think about the process of recording. I'm so sure about the picks that I want to make, and you always say you get so stressed out before you make a pick, and I'm like, this is the time I'm not going to get stressed out, yet I always end up getting this stressed out. It's very frustrating for me. Okay, I'm gonna go with the most influential game. I was gonna try to get cute with this, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna go with most influential. I can't help myself. I'm going to go with the surefire pick for most influential game of the year. It is a game that inspired the storytelling mechanics that we see in some of our favorite games now, like BioShock. This environmental storytelling borrowed heavily even from Dark Souls. Kind of creepy, a little bit of player building. We had a remaster of this game just this past year. It's System Shock 2.
Fuck, that is definitely was on my list. So that's great. We played it on the podcast. Do we play number 1 or 2?
I think we played number 2. I'm pretty sure we played number 2. The problem is, when we played it, it did not age as well as we kind of hoped that it would. But at the time, it was like untouchable, that game.
No, it was such a good game. This was very much high on my list. So good for you for getting it. Can you remind me again? Did you take that under influential or just as a game? I
took that under influential. Okay. I think just in terms of the character development of the kind of branching storylines, what Deus Ex wouldn't be Deus Ex without System Shock 2. BioShock wouldn't be BioShock. I mean, not only is it kind of the spiritual predecessor, but so many of the games that we play would be entirely different if they hadn't had to use System Shock 2 as some sort of influence.
No, I could totally see how that's the influence too. And, carrying over a story that is relatively serious, I think that is, even in 1999, kind of a newish thing, or what it markets itself towards is also an interesting thing for video games and how it's perceived. So that's a very good pick. Okay, so just to recap, after 3 rounds, I have influential for Super Smash Bros. I have Game of the Year, Donkey Kong 64, and I have 1 game so far of the 3 with Gran Turismo 2. What about you, Mikey?
Yes. I've got, as Game of the Year, I'll lead off with that because it was my first pick. I've got Tony Hawk Pro Skater as my game number 1. I've got Final Fantasy VIII, so far that's going up against your Gran Turismo 2. Yep. And as influential, I've got System Shock 2, and that's going up against Super Smash Bros. Both influential in different ways, but that's a tough category.
That's a very tough category. And now it's funny because the underappreciated, which might be a tiebreak that we might not need, and you're like, do I hold anything for that, or do I grab things now?
That's true. Tough. That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Okay, let's go with... Okay, so I'm going to go next in general category. I'm going to go with game number 2 of 3. I'm going to do something we did on the podcast and something I really enjoyed and something I can still think about because the number of times we did it. I'm going to take Driver.
Driver. Okay.
Yeah. I liked playing Driver. We did on the podcast. I had a lot of fun doing it. It was very frustrating, but at the same time, the aesthetic was a lot of fun. The driving, while we lost a ton, was still great. Like, I still had a good time doing it. And I think I would play that game more even now than I would have back then. So I think there's a long lasting appeal to it. So I'm going to take Driver with game number 2.
It's so funny because I was hovering over Driver when I was thinking about Aged Poorly. I was hovering over Driver because I'm like, maybe that. And then it reminded me, I was like, wait a second, I think we really liked Driver. And I went back to look at our scores. We gave it like 1 and below in our retro score, and we each gave it 3s in our current score.
Oh, okay, okay.
because it was hard and it demanded a lot of you. We probably as kids never made it out of the tutorial, that notoriously demanding tutorial, but it's so rare that you get a game that is just focused on being what it is and doing that well. And Driver is a really good game for that. So I'm happy with that, with that pick. I think that's a good way to round it out. Granted, you got 2 driving games, Andrew, so you gotta watch yourself.
I do. Watch yourself, officer. One is driver, like really, like I am a pilot of a very fancy automobile. The second one, I'm a leather jacket daddy who is, busting through windows and warehouses and stuff.
And who ends up driving the president around in one of the most notoriously unbeatable missions in video game history.
Well, if it was anything like the first level that took us 74 times, I can imagine what the last one was going to be like. All right, Mikey, where are you going?
Okay, so now I got to round out. I've still got Poorly Aged, Underappreciated. I'm going to hold off for now, and then I've got 2 other games that I can pick. I definitely want to start rounding off my team because I think it's important to have a good balance of game styles. I've got a first-person shooter. I've got kind of a sports game. I've got a JRPG in there. I think I'm going to go for my strategy game now. And I'm going to go with a game that you and I talk about all the time on this podcast. I worried about picking this too early because it definitely would have been a personal pick, but it's It's Age of Empires 2.
God damn it. Legitimately, my top 3 favorite video games of all time.
Yeah.
You have 2 of maybe my 3 top franchises of all time.
Tony Hawk, when we started this off, I was like, there's no way I'm getting Age of Empires and Tony Hawk Pro Skater. It's tough though, because
damn it.
Did you also struggle with the idea of like, do we just love it that much? And like, are we stepping on our own toes by picking it too early? I don't know.
That's exactly it. I fear that sometimes I become a caricature of myself here. And it's like, well, of course he's going to take Age of Empires. And I'm like, no, I'll take it later in the draft. Thank you very much. Nope. Didn't take it at all. God damn it. Went in the 4th round.
Like
I should have seen that coming.
This whole thing has been a standoff of you and me just figuring out when that game is going to be picked.
That is probably true. Like that sucks. Good for you. You deserve it. But I am not happy about it.
You talk about another game that worked when it came out. Like 1999 is just, it to me, is now standing out so much as a year that only could have existed and only could have been good in 1999. Like, I know a lot of people still love to go back and play Tony Hawk Pro Skater, especially like the original. It is a very simple game. So is Driver. So is Age of Empires 2. But the reason why they're so good is because they're simple and they don't try to be too much more. They're just like, we don't have the processing power to be massive open world games. Those don't exist yet. Let's just pick one angle and be really good at it. And it was a time of gaming that I really appreciated for that.
Oh, absolutely. No, the amount of hours I put into Age of Empires might be more than any other game. I would just replay it all the time. And because of the randomness, or whatever, the every game was different element of it, I absolutely love that game. And it crushes me because I currently have a Mac and I've had a Mac for a very long time. And those games are refusing to being Microsoft properties, refusing to switch over. And you're like, but you know what? Honestly, though, maybe it's best for me. It's kind of like if they made like cigarettes illegal and I'm like, oh, that's good. That means I can't have any.
You're already struggling to not play Civilization and Fortnite every day of your life. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's things that they've made mobile and I can just carry around in my pocket now. Yeah, that would have been a nightmare. All right, so that's going to be your 4th pick, right? 4th pick.
That is my 4th pick, yeah.
Okay, so for my 5th pick, I am going to take game number 3.
Yeah, we're leaving Poorly Aged, eh? We're not even touching that one right now.
I know, which I said was actually one of the lowest categories, but because I don't have strong conviction on it, I'm leaving it last because I'm like, you can make an argument either way. I'm like, for my 3rd game and my 5th pick, I'm going to be taking Mario Party.
Okay, great.
Another one that I just think, once again, predicts the future of video gaming. I know it's not in the category of most influential. I took that Super Smash Bros. Instead, but it's the same thing. You play with different characters, and you're all trying to do elements that are outside of the normal video game realm. It changed the arena in which they competed, and it's so much fun. The amount of arguments I've gotten, the amount of burns I have on my palms because of the stupid fucking controller and snapping handles and stuff like that. That game was so much fun, and is still a game today that if you said to me like, "You want to play Mario Party?" I'm like, "Fuck yeah, that's awesome! I never played that. That's great." So Mario Party's gonna be my 3rd game.
I remember as a kid, I think my feeling of Mario Party is kind of tainted because I never really had friends over to play it. I only ever played it single player. So my appreciation for the franchise and for the game itself only really started in my adult life, like going back to play it. Like we went to go visit my player one's family, and her brother has an old N64, and we were playing Mario Party on it. I was like, this is fucking amazing. Like, let me do this all day long. So I like that pick. I know also like we talk about North American releases and kind of basing it off of that. Mario Party 2 came out in 1999 in Japan, but number 1 came out in 1998. So they were a year ahead of us. And that just kind of, yes, exactly. Yeah, there were a ton of these ones that I had to check. There were a couple actually that I double checked while we've been recording that I had to remove.
Wikipedia is open on my other screen right here because I keep looking at ones.
Yeah, before I make a pick, I'm looking it up just to double check and make sure.
Oh, can I tell you before you get to your next pick too? Because like the game of the year is a goddamn lie because the games of the year are all over the place.
That's true.
So I looked at it originally. I'm like, Ocarina of Time. Fuck yeah, number 1 pick. There you go. Write that down. No, and it came out a year before that. It's like, well, what the hell, you know?
100%. And Soul Calibur has been listed on some Game of the Year site, and I think it's just because Game of the Year has been like at that time was kind of like deregulated, so they do it in like August, and it would just be like from like middle of the year to middle of the year. Okay, so your pick there is Mario Party. I've still got to go for my third game, poorly aged and underappreciated. I think I'm gonna go. I don't know how I don't know how I can leave this one out. It rounds it out nicely in a way that it gives a little bit of tension to my list. This is a very influential game, a game that kind of came out of nowhere and demanded more of the industry when it came to its genre, a franchise that became more than just the name itself. It's Silent Hill as my third game.
Nice. Well, hard to argue that one. You know, like there's so much imagery and iconography from that game that we still know about today, that we still, you know, we're going to make a Silent Hill video game, TV show or movie with Guillermo del Toro now. And like, it's such an important thing, even 25 years later. It's really hard to argue that this wouldn't be one of the 6 picks. Yeah,
and I remember you and I going back and playing Silent Hill on the podcast and being like, man, this game still plays well. And it was at the time of Resident Evil, which was so slow and kind of like expected when it came to horror. Like, this is not to take anything away from Resident Evil, but it became a little formulaic and like purposely difficult to control. And then Silent Hill comes along as almost like a Twin Peaks-esque horror, which was a very different take, and one that I really appreciated. A game that forces you to die within the first 40 minutes. I couldn't wrap my head around that. And then horror had never been the same. So I actually had considered this one for most influential as well, but I'm just taking it for game 3.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah, no, I think that makes total sense. Okay, there you go. So my last pick of this draft, before we get into the bonus rounds, is going to be poorly aged. Now, this is also your last category too, right?
It is. So we're drafting against each other here. And now we'll say for the listener who doesn't quite understand poorly aged, the delicate balance of picking for poorly aged is you want to pick the game that was really good at the time, but has fallen from grace the most. So you can't just go pick a shitty game. It has to be a game that we remembered well, and the better we remembered it compared to how poorly it plays now, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah. And for the most part too, there are people that are big fans of these games still. And so it's a lot of like, come on and fight me kind of attitude towards this. And I'm going to look you right in the eye and tell you exactly what I think about poorly aged. I'm going to take Pokemon Snap.
I was wondering if you were going to go with this one.
If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Thank you very much. 298, kind of bold place to start. Is that we have a thing called the Pokemon Snap corollary, where we use that as a comparison of saying, if you stripped away the IP, you stripped away the thing that you know about this game, the fact that you're a photographer on rails and you see Pokemon, if you took away the Pokemon and they just became animals, would this be a fun game? And the idea that I'm arguing is, no, I don't think it would be, because it's so limited in the amount that you can do. You have to replay it so many times because it intentionally focuses on like, well, you got to look right when sometimes you have to look left. And you're like, okay. I just don't think this is a full video game. And so much so that they made a remake or a sequel a couple of years ago. And even then, it was exciting, and we played it. You and I played it, but didn't it feel like, hey, it came out, and they were like, anyone else? No one. They want to talk about it 2 months later. No, I want to talk about it. No,
yeah, it was all anyone was talking about for the first couple weeks, and then no one talked about it.
Nobody. And it's too bad, because there are a lot of games on here for poorly aged that I could argue I still like, but I understand in the grand scheme of video games and like how important things are, maybe this wasn't one of the biggest ones. So poorly aged. Also, I will say, sorry, the other point I was going to say is this year is full of tons of Pokemon crap. Tons of crappy Pokemon games come out this year. And I think it's just an example of them rushing to get things out because they're like, holy shit, Pokemon is white hot. We need to sell some stuff. So my game is going to be poorly aged Pokemon Snap.
And I want to contextualize the Pokemon Snap corollary as well, which is I think of in 300 episodes roughly, maybe my favorite thing to have come out of this podcast. And it isn't to say necessarily that the game is bad because it just has the coat of paint of Pokemon on what would otherwise be unenjoyable mechanics. It's to say it's the question of whether or not the coat of paint is what makes the game good, because sometimes it is. However, it is fair to say that the game may not have aged great. I kind of come on the other side of it, where I think that game aged fantastic for the same reason as like the simplicity of the other games we chose. There's no other game like this one. So if I just want to sit down and have like a brain dead experience looking at my favorite Pokemon, which were the original 150, this is the only way I can do that now. And I enjoyed that. But I think a lot of people would probably argue with you. And to go back, I actually looked it up as you were talking. We did Pokemon Snap as episode, like one of the really early episode, 1, 2, 3, 4, episode 5 on this podcast, May 29th, 2018. Your current score was a 2.5 and mine was a 3. And I think that's fair. I think that kind of stands now. Whereas a lot of people may think highly or may think lower of it, but a decent pick. Let me now go to mine. There were a couple. I really wanted to go with Shenmue on this one, but it didn't come out in 1999 in North America, unfortunately. Other than that, man, like it is a tough category to pick for, because most of the games that were good, and probably because the ones that were good for specific reasons, the simplicity of them keeps them good today.
Right.
I have two ways I can go with this one, and I think I'm going to go with the bigger name in gaming at the time, rather than going with, I think, the bigger franchise today with kind of a bum entry. I'm going to go with Medal of Honor. The original Medal of Honor came out in 1999. It was a war game, and I think the fact that you had a realistic war-based video game... What are you smirking at? Did it not come out?
No, keep going. I was going to explain mine afterwards.
Okay, interesting. The reason why people liked it, I think, was it was this realistic take on gaming. I think a lot of us thought that it matured the element of gaming in general. It adultified it, because this is war, this is real, this isn't like shooting laser guns, this is shooting like M1 Garens or whatever you call those things.
Yeah.
And it took you back to a point. I mean, it is the building blocks of Call of Duty, so there's an argument to be made that it in itself is influential. But to play this game, console-based shooters have gotten so much better and so much more fine-tuned. And I'd rather play either the earliest of them, like a GoldenEye, which is so poorly controlled but so highly sentimental, or or the best of, which is like a Halo or something like that, which masters kind of the look with one and shoot with the other. Medal of Honor just feels like a slog, and it's a slog that was once considered like potential game of the year material. It's like a 90% on Metacritic. So I was aiming for that one that was really high, that just doesn't compare to the other types of games like it in its genre nowadays.
That's interesting. The reason I was smiling is because I had it under a small category for underappreciated. Only because it just died out so quickly. But at the time was a really important video game that, brought to the forefront these shooters from World War II, which eventually would become the biggest games in the world for almost a decade. So that was the part that I was going to say, maybe outside the game, but its influence on the video game culture entirely. But I can see how you're saying it with poorly aged, considering there are just better versions of this game.
Yeah, it's funny because it really could fit. You could also make the argument that it fits in game 1, 2, and 3, and that's why it's just like because at the time it was. But it's the reason why I wanted this pick, and it was a fun pick to me, was because there is an argument to be made. I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with it. It reminds me a little bit of like my Resident Evil 2 pick way back when we did the draft that year. People hated that, and I'm like, man, go back and play it. It's not as good.
It's not. Remember that was the biggest eye opener from this podcast. That was like, oof. Okay, so for my last pick, which is going to be the tiebreaker, which might not be taken for granted over here, underappreciated. It's another game we did from this podcast, which is not surprising. We do retro video games sometimes. Is Siphon Filter. I liked going back to play that game. I liked the game at the time, but good God, did that game just kind of disappear? It was a very big video game series for a bit, but now you look back, you're like, whew, that game just is gone. And I just and I'm not sure why. So I'm going to say underappreciated because it deserves some respect on its name.
Yeah, and it was a fun one too, and it is largely forgotten. And a game that like I remember when like Metal Gear was out, it was like Metal Gear and Siphon Filter, and I think maybe there's only room for 2 because then Splinter Cell came out and everyone fucking forgot about Siphon Filter, and that may be the only reason why. But definitely pay some homage to Siphon Filter because that game, going back and playing it as well, was a ton of fun. Underappreciated. Mine.
Yeah,
I like to make underappreciated for me, and I'm gonna go with a game that was.
This one's for Daddy.
This one's just for Daddy. I'm gonna go with a game that when you find someone who has also played this game, their eyes light up when you bring it up. Like no other game I've ever played except for maybe Freedom Fighters. When you find someone else who's played it, they're like, "You played that game too?" Yeah, and it's a game that just that was almost like comparable to a Super Smash Bros, except it was a little bit more isometric, but it was a brawler and there were weapons in it. It was on the Dreamcast, so it played well and it looked fantastic at the time, especially for 1999. It's Power Stone. Give me more Power Stone in my life.
I don't know if I know this video game, Mikey. Power Stone.
I think we brought it up on the podcast before, and I don't think you do know it. It's a game that like I would adore. Maybe we should do that at some point on the podcast. Because it was a ton of fun. It was this you'd have like 4-on-4. You'd collect these stones as they fell in the arena, and you'd also just try to beat up the other person by picking up guns and weapons and all this sort of stuff. And if you got all the stones, you almost went like Super Saiyan, and then you just got to kick the shit out of people for a while. It was a ton of fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, that sounds great. Yeah, so definitely underappreciated for sure.
You want to go back and recap your picks there?
I would love to. The 3 games I chose were Gran Turismo 2, Driver, and Mario Party. The most influential is Super Smash Bros. Poorly aged is Pokemon Snap. Game of the year is Donkey Kong 64. And underappreciated is Siphon Filter.
It's a good lineup, Andrew, but not quite as good as the lineup I'm about to read to you. Game 1, Final Fantasy VIII. Game 2, Age of Empires 2. Game 3, Silent Hill. I mean, that is, we're talking about Golden State Warriors style over here. Most influential, we've got System Shock 2, and not of this year or last year. I'm talking
the one they won the championship from.
Most influential, System Shock 2. Poorly aged is Medal of Honor. Game of the year is Tony Hawk Pro Skater, and underappreciated is the lesser known Power Stone.
Wow, what a lineup! What a lineup! So, how are we going to decide a winner? It's a great question. It's a great question, D-Pads.
Teacher, excuse me, I'm raising my hand.
Yes, stupid one.
You know what my parents call me. Did they tell you that? I have an idea for
okay.
I have an idea for how maybe we can find out who wins the draft. I have an idea.
Sure. What's your idea, little stupid one?
Well, first of all, I resent that, but secondly, I completely understand where you're coming from because I'm afraid of authority. Yeah, I think maybe if we put it to a vote on our social medias at Retrograde Andy, at Retrograde Mikey, at Retrograde Pod on Twitter, or they can send us an email at the retrogradepodcast@gmail.com. I'm sorry if I overstepped.
No, I think that's a great idea. You can vote on Twitter at Retrograde Pod, at Retrograde Mikey, at Retrograde Andy, and over you could email us. Just tell us who won on that one too. So.
Who are you talking to? Is the rest of the class, or what do you think?
This is how you find out I've been in an asylum the whole time and there's never been a podcast, is I've just been talking out loud and I'm like, great idea.
You've just been a teacher.
yeah, I've been a teacher, yes. And I snap too. Like no one ever drew you anything, guys. It's like, what? Yeah, so please let us know. We'll tabulate this and it'll probably be 2 episodes from now. We can probably find out who won.
Yeah, and we mentioned this, Andrew, before a couple times on the podcast, but episode 300 is coming up, and we'd love to hear from you guys. Send us a little note, a little letter, maybe congratulate us on so much time wasted, making you guys happy. Send us a little note, maybe your thoughts on 300, where you started, why you're still listening, if you're still out there. Yeah. Send us
favorite
a little
game, favorite memory, favorite episode.
Yeah, 100%. The episode that got you into it, the episode you agreed with us most, the episode you disagreed with us most.
Totally.
Just some memories of the podcast. We want to read some of those on an upcoming episode, and we'll make sure to shout you out.
Yeah. So yeah, honestly, because we do this podcast for you guys, and so sometimes you we joke about this all the time on the podcast. Sometimes you feel like you're talking into a void, and then you look at the numbers, you're like, wait, a lot of people are listening to this.
100%.
So get back at us. I want to hear what you liked about it. I'm talking to you. You talk to me. Come on, it's your turn now. Let's go.
Yeah.
I've been doing all the work here. My back's hurting.
My throat hurts because I'm talking so much. I don't want to talk anymore.
Yeah, you talk now. That's your job. Next 300's on you. So please let us know and get at us wherever you can. But until then, thank you for listening to the 1999 draft. We love every single one of you, and we can't wait to talk to you soon. My name's Andrew Bascom, and with me, as always, is the bad boy of podcasting, Mr. Bebop himself,
Mikey Aaronworth.
This is the Retrograde Podcast.
Game over. Andrew, do you want to set your clock back to 1999 again? Because I don't think if it sets to 2000, we're going to survive.
Oh, yeah, right. Planes will just fall out of the sky. Computers will explode.
Yeah.
Fridges will eat people.
Of all the things that can eat me, please be a fridge.
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
Yeah, super wet.